Getting students motivated can be extremely hard for teachers because sometimes kids just don't feel like being at school. Like, they might feel like school is boring. They might not be really catching on to the instruction. They might have things that are going on at home that are interfering with them at school. A lot of different things could be happening. They just may feel burnt out. They may feel drained. So they just come to school. They just lack motivation. So one of the biggest things that teachers want to focus on is figuring out creative and effective ways to motivate students on a daily basis. Um, a lot of people do rewards, a lot of people do prizes, contests, competitions, things like that to get students motivated. They might give them a little extra time on the computer, things like that, just to get students motivated. But personally, I think that it's so much more than just that. It's kind of complex. I think that motivation should be incorporated in every aspect of school, not just rewards. But I'll get into that more as the video goes along. As a teacher, you really have to know how to limit distractions. A lot of kids just want to be distracted. Like, they're in school, they're bored again, like I said, and they just want to be distracted. Any little thing distracts them. A piece of paper can fly off their desk and they're just fascinated by it. It could be an ant crawling and they're just fascinated by it. They could just break their pencil and just want to sharpen it just so that they can get up out of their seat. Like, anything is going to distract the kids. So as a teacher, what you have to do is put up systems and procedures that are going to limit distractions. You want to purposefully do that because you don't want a whole lot of distractions. When you go to make up your classroom management plan, you have to make sure that you have a system for pencil sharpening, a rule saying, you can't keep getting up and sharpening your pencil all day. Like, you have to have a certain number of pencils for each day. Shoot, even make them use mechanical pencils, something like that, just to limit that distraction. Because trust me, that's a huge one that goes on the pencil, or I don't have one, or it's always a reason why they can't start their work, and that's not the only thing. It's so many other things. So basically, what I'm saying is, just make sure that when you do your classroom management plan, you're doing things that are going to limit distractions. You don't want the students to be distracted and off task all day. So you're going to put rules and procedures in place that are going to shut that down and make sure that never even happens. You just want to use any type of preventive measure, when you're writing your classroom management plan, because you don't want any type of distractions along the day. That'll just mess up everything, and you just won't be able to get to everything that you need to get to during the day. You just won't, because you'll just keep getting distracted and you'll keep running out of time. Next, I'm going to talk about time management. That's a huge thing. You really, really, really want to make sure that you do everything in a timely manner. And like I said before, you want to limit the distractions so you can make sure that you can do that, because those distractions, they can take up so many minutes, and the minutes that you're losing, they're like essential. You need them in order to get to all of the subjects, especially if you are a K-4 teacher and you have to get math, reading, science, and social studies in one day, and specials and lunch and everything else. Yeah, you really have to make sure you limit those distractions. But back to time. As far as time management goes, the timer is your friend. I suggest that you use a timer. You always want to make sure that you give yourself a certain amount of time, and you make sure that the students are aware that they only have a certain amount of time too. It's kind of like you guys are racing against the clock. You kind of like make it a part of the class, and the kids really get motivated by that once they see that timer and they know that they only have a certain amount of time, and once they hear that buzzer they have to stop, they get on task faster and they work more diligently, in my opinion. Okay, so giving instructions is crucial, especially when you're working with younger students. It's crucial. You have to make sure that you're giving explicit directions. You have to make sure that you're speaking clearly when you're giving the directions. You have to make sure that they're simple directions. You can't make it too wordy. You can't make it too complex. Simple and straight to the point. You have to make sure that you repeat it at least 3 times. At least 3 times. You have to make sure that you get the students to repeat the directions, because they have to get it into their head. Because if not, once it's time for them to work, they're not going to know what to do. And that's another thing that's going to take up some of your time. If it's time for students to work and they don't know what to do, then it's like, yeah, you're back at square one. You have to re-explain everything all over again. That takes up more time. So to eliminate that, you want to make sure that your directions are clear from the start. And you also want to make sure that you have the directions visible somewhere in the classroom, so you can write it like on a board. Some classes have blackboards, some have smart boards. You can even like give handouts with the directions on it, something that they have that's visible or something tangible, so that after you've given the directions, they still have something to refer back to as they're working. Because I had trouble with that at first, and I learned my lesson the hard way. You have to keep repeating yourself, and you have to make it simple. Okay, so getting students to do independent work is another thing that can be challenging for some teachers. I've witnessed this in certain classes that I've seen, like when I did my practicum and when I did like my field experiences. So I understand like it's very hard to get students to work independently, especially when the students want to be distracted, or they don't want to really get on task, or you know what I mean. So it's just kind of hard to get them to work independently. So as a teacher, you really want to promote independent work. You have to literally teach students how to work independently, and you have to train them. And I think you really have to do that from the start. Like, you can't have students come in the school year, in the beginning of the school year, and just expect them to be able to work the way that you want them to work. You have to teach them different ways to work independently. You have to teach them the rules of working independently. You can't talk to such and such. You can't share your answers. Or maybe you do, if they're working independently, maybe you do want them to pair up with people. So then you teach them the rules of that. Like, okay, we're using inside voices. Okay, we're not copying off of one another, we're actually sharing information, certain things like that. And as a teacher, when you're designing your classroom management plan, or your plan for whatever, you can decide specifically what you want that to consist of. But I'm just saying, like, just keep that in mind. Like, you always want to make sure you're training the students on how to work independently, because they're not going to know how to, like, at first. They're going to be like, what? When you say, all right, do it on your own, they're going to be like, what? And they're going to be like, well, I need help. Because, a lot of times students are, a little dependent. It's true. They're dependent sometimes. So they always say, I need help. And they do that without even reading the instructions and, things like that. So maybe that can be a part of your plan. Like, you're teaching them how to read instructions, and you're teaching them that it's essential to do that before asking for help. Maybe a part of your plan could be, you're not allowed to ask a question until you've read every word on the page, and then you formulate a question in your brain that makes sense. You can't just raise your hand and say, I need help, and you didn't read. Like, that stuff you have to address right away, so that they know exactly what you expect when it's time for them to work independently, and it just cuts out all the nonsense. Another thing that I've noticed is like recording information. Teachers have to record a whole bunch of information all day. They have to fill out so much paperwork. They have to fill out homework charts if they choose to do that. Some teachers don't do that, but some teachers do. Homework charts. They have to do grades. Every teacher does that. Who knows how they document their behavior charts. Excuse me. Who knows how they document their behavior charts. So, like, as a teacher, you're recording all day. You're writing stuff down all day. The best thing to do when you're recording is to keep it simple. When you're recording things, do something that you can quickly jot down and keep it moving. Like, you don't want to sit down and write super long things in the middle of the day. Like, you save that type of stuff for the end of the day. But as the day is going by and you're recording stuff, just keep it simple. Keep all your systems simple. Make sure your grade book is simple. Make sure your grading system is simple. Make sure your grading book is organized. It's going to make it so much easier when it's report card time and it's time for you to enter those grades in. Like, less is always way more when you're documenting and when you're recording stuff, because it gets too wordy. Like, when you're doing like qualitative reports, yes, that's when you want to sit there and you want to write, and but you do that at home. Like, when you're there and you're working, like, you have to make sure everything is simple, simple, simple. Check mark. Simple. All the extra complex stuff, you have to do that at home. You cannot do that in the classroom, because then you're cutting into your time. And like I said, time is like one of the most essential things. So you really have to just keep it simple. Make sure everything that you do is systematic too. Just make sure you get in the same routine each and every day. So that just makes it easier for you. When you turn your grades in at the end of the marking period, everything's done. You don't have to stress and be like, oh my god, I gotta do this, oh my god, I gotta do that. Like, it just makes your job even harder. So you just want to make sure everything is simple and everything is systematic, and you just want to keep it straight to the point. Don't do anything extra.